Fires in Britain are on the increase, killing hundreds and injuring thousands. A new report says too little is being done to prevent casualties. 300 lives could be saved every year. But fire chiefs say tight budgets are threatening their prevention work and the public is at risk. Weir is one of the busiest fire brigades in the country. It's now handling nearly 35,000 emergencies a year. On January the 12th, these firefighters at Tynemouth Station took a 999 call from an elderly man in Whitley Bay. He told them he was in a wheelchair, the house was on fire and he couldn't get out. Within seconds, the first pump was ready to go. 5 minutes later, they were tackling the blaze, frantically searching for 3 people trapped in it.
Your heart's banging away, you're really rushing, your hands is everywhere, you're under beds, moving settees, chairs, all sorts out of the way just to try and get to these persons.
One of the lads went past us and he found a casualty in the doorway of the back bedroom and he shouted casualty. So I went across and it was the elderly gentleman who had actually put the call in.
There's no one outside the job knows what it's like. To see that and to know that there's been such a waste of life, it's sad, and you don't know whether you want to cry or whether you want to hit something or just go to sleep and wish it hadn't happened.
In the short time it took for the fire brigade to arrive, the whole family living at number 13 Kings Road perished. Clarence Saw, who dialed 999, his daughter Mary Austin, who taught art at the local school, and her husband Bob. They've been recently celebrating Mrs. Austin's early retirement. Her daughter says her mother had been looking forward to the extra time she'd have with her family and her artwork.
She had the whole life ahead of her to do what she wanted, and she had a studio. She had it built for herself, and she was just going to dabble and paint and all the things she'd want to do but never could when she was teaching. My dad was always one of the lads, you know, and absolutely adored my mother. I couldn't explain to you how I felt. I think you would have to actually know what it's like to lose 3 members of your family in one go, you know, just sort of somebody knocks on the door and, you know, tells you. It's unbelievable. You can't, I mean, I still can't believe, I still can't understand and get to grips with it. It's far too, I don't know, it's just so hard for me to actually think that they're dead and they're not coming back. It's just too heartbreaking.
The next morning, fire investigators went in looking for clues. It's not yet known what caused the blaze, but serious fires like this have increased by 1/3 over the past 10 years.
This is where we believe the fire started. There's the lounge. Yesterday was a normal lounge with the armchairs, settees, basically what you would have in your own room. You can see the television there. That would have been the normal television yesterday. As you can see from the window frames and the charring, that the severity of the fire was, very, very large.
Every year, fires kill more than 700 people and injure nearly 15,000. The number of injuries has shot up by nearly 50% in the past decade. The tragedy is, like the deaths here, they're so often preventable. Would a smoke alarm have made that much difference in such a severe fire?
The smoke alarm in this case would have made a lot of difference. What it would have done was to give the people a lot more time to actually know there was a fire and then leave the property and get out safely. They would have been able to walk out.
The Austin family didn't even make it downstairs. All 3 were found in the bedrooms, including the elderly man who'd called the fire brigade just 5 minutes earlier. He was 91. It's the elderly and the vulnerable who are most at risk from dying in a fire. They're also the people least likely to have a smoke alarm, a simple precaution that can mean the difference between life and death. Preventing fires is an essential part of any brigade's work, as important as fighting them. But now chief fire officers say their basic fire safety promotion work is under threat and lives are at risk.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Station Officer Peter Wayhill from the local fire station. Hello, Mr. Sheehan. I've just popped along today to have a few minutes with you about smoke alarms. Now, the local fire brigade, in fact the fire brigade generally throughout the country, are very concerned about the number of people who are being injured and killed in their home and they're not fitting smoke alarms.
For the Tyne and Wear Brigade, fire prevention work like this is a priority, trying to stop people like the Shebas becoming the next casualties. They don't have a smoke alarm, and that means they're 3 times more likely to die in a fire.
Does it give me time to get down the stairs? Because I'm not very good on my legs. I can't get down the stairs too quick.
Well, these are an early warning device. The important thing, when you hear it, straight out of the house. Call the fire brigade, and then don't come back in. Don't come back in for those precious little things. Just leave them. You've got the precious little things out there. That's you and your husband. That's the important thing.
To get their message across to young and old, the fire brigade have assembled a mobile unit, which they've been taking to schools around the county. Almost 100 children are killed by fires every year.
So you have found a fire in your house. You discover a fire. There's one thing that you can do to stop the fire from spreading to the rest of the house. Can anybody tell me what that might be?
Close the door.
Well done.
This kind of fire safety promotion work saves lives. In a 2-year period, the number of fires in Tyne and Wear rose by almost 2/3, yet the number of deaths fell by nearly half. And there have been similar success stories in other brigades. In one case, injuries dropped by nearly 70% in 2 years.
Well done. So if you have a fire in your house, you need the fire brigade.
We consider in Tyne and Wear that it's been extremely successful. Our statistics for fire fatalities and rescues from 1990 through to 1992 show that quite conclusively, that numbers of fires in Tyne and Wear have risen, whereas fatalities in fires and rescues from fires, particularly in domestic property, have dropped.
Victor 01, this was an adult male caller. 0277. Fire brigade. Location on
He stated the building was on fire in the
then
park.
we'll send someone
Can you get me a
along.
location of that number, please?
The brigade has also begun tackling the growing problem of false alarms, which now make up 40% of all brigade work across the country. More than a third are malicious.
Fire brigade.
But fire brigades have to respond to them, even when they know there'll be nothing at the other end. This is a printout of every single call that comes through to this control room, both genuine and hoax. But we're not talking about the odd 1 or 2 hoax calls here. Tyne and Wear Fire Brigade has to deal with 6,000 malicious calls a year. That's nearly 20 a day, every day of the year. And each one of these 6,000 calls has to be treated as a genuine emergency, which means someone could be burning to death in a real fire while the brigade is out attending the hoax call. But now, with the help of the police, they're out to catch the culprits. New technology means all 999 calls can be instantly traced, so the hoax caller gets a call themselves and a possible 6-month prison sentence. We've disguised the voices of the couple inside.
The call was made at 11:46 on the 9th of January. What we're trying to do is to prevent, or an attempt to prevent, hoax callers to the fire brigade, sending them to report the fires that aren't taking place. They could be
exactly.
You've done it.
No.
You mustn't be pissed or drunk.
No.
Whichever word you want to use. You have.
No, no way. No way.
You damn well have. If it's been traced from this address, there's no men in this house. The dogs don't speak.
Yeah.
Are you telling me lies?
Do me a favour.
Because what you've told us is you're the only male that lives here.
Yeah.
Nobody else has a key. You've agreed it's your telephone number.
Right.
And we know for a fact that a call was made from that phone number by a man, not a youth or a child, reporting a fire.
No explanation at all.
Fire brigades don't have to carry out prevention work, and because of the way they're funded, they can actually have their budget cut if they do reduce the number of fires and hoax calls. In a report out today, the watchdog body, the Audit Commission, says the funding formula, which penalises brigades for carrying out fire prevention, should be reviewed, and fire authorities should be given a statutory duty to promote fire safety. The Home Office are mainly responsible for the fire brigade. We asked them to take part in the programme, but they declined. Chief fire officers say the Audit Commission's recommendations make sense.
The more incidents we attend, the more money we get, and that includes hoax fire calls. Now, I mean, this is obviously a nonsense. I get paid, or the authority gets paid, more money for the more hoax calls it has. Now, I often reflect on this, and I think to myself, my senior management meetings, when we sit round the table and discuss weighty issues, would probably be better employed if we all put on dirty raincoats, went out into the streets, found telephone boxes, and made hoax calls.
Then you get more money.
Then we'd get more money.
And how would that apply to smoke alarm and safety campaigns?
Well, again, you know, the more incidents we have, the more money we get. So obviously it is not in my interest to prevent fires happening, which is a ludicrous situation for a chief fire officer to be in.
Petition. It's against proposed cuts in Tynemere Fire Brigade budgets.
The brigade's prevention work is now threatened by budget cuts. They're not the only ones. The fire service nationally isn't getting any more money this year. With inflation, that amounts to a £44 million shortfall.
There was a fire in Whitney Bay last week in which 3 lives were lost.
The Audit Commission believed money could be saved by greater efficiency, but fire chiefs disagree. A public eye survey of English fire brigades reveals more than 40% plan to cut back on fire prevention.
Chief fire officers have got to give priority to their operational response, and if they're faced with a diminishing financial resource situation, then obviously they've got to look round at areas where they can cut and cut safely. And fire safety education is obviously a target because it is not a statutory responsibility on the fire service at this point in time.
Even though it may mean more unnecessary deaths?
Even though it may mean more unnecessary deaths.
Nearly all brigades, even the smaller rural ones like Hereford and Worcester, say the financial crisis threatens not only the safety of the general public, but that of the people they depend upon, the firefighters themselves. In 1993, Hereford and Worcester dealt with one of Britain's worst factory fires at the Sun Valley processing plant. 2 firefighters were sent inside to check how far the fire had spread. Another colleague kept in touch with them by radio.
Basically, they went in, radio messages, no problem at all, until the one that did give me cause for concern was the fact that there was a heat build-up, but there was something happening above them. Was a message that come back from Dave Morris. My immediate reaction was said, right, withdraw immediately, get yourself out of there.
But the roof had started to collapse and the 2 firefighters couldn't get out. Lost inside the vast complex and trapped by falling debris, Dave Morris's messages became desperate.
Very difficult to know what he was saying because he was so distressed. He was very garbled, very high-pitched. He was obviously panicking. To realise that he was in a position that was causing him that much distress was heartrending, you know, because I could basically outside I could do nothing about it.
John Davis and Dave Morris died in the fire, leaving 2 widows and 5 children. Many of their colleagues took time off through stress and shock. Some have never returned. Others are still coming to terms with what happened.
I'm able to think about them now without sort of breaking down or anything, and I can talk about them. You know, I still think of him fondly. I miss Dave Morris because I worked with him. He was a great buddy of mine, you know. I miss him now. Probably always will.
An investigation found that at the root of the tragedy was poor preparation and inadequate training. The firefighters went into the burning building with no hose reel and therefore no means of fighting the flames. Neither had they taken in a guideline to help them retrace their route. And crucial information about the layout of the building hadn't been passed on to them. The new chief fire officer is trying to put right what went so badly wrong.
I think it was due more to perhaps a shortfall in training, and also that the brigade at that time didn't have a system which made sure information about buildings was widely circulated to brigade personnel, and then from that plans formulated to enable them to deal with these types of incidents.
But why was that? Why didn't they have that plan?
Well, because it was an area at the time, I think, which was considered a low priority.
Okay, good afternoon, people. This afternoon's exercise, heat and humidity.
Hereford and Worcester Brigade have had to launch a retraining programme following a strongly critical report from the Health and Safety Executive. These firefighters are learning about breathing apparatus procedure, which was singled out in the investigation on Sun Valley. This work should help to ensure that such tragedies are far less common, but Hereford and Worcester have only just started their retraining and say there's a long way to go.
All we've done at the moment is covered the basic level. I mean, we now need to introduce things like hot fire training. I mean, this brigade does not train its firefighters in hot training situations because we haven't got the facilities. And we should be. If we expect people to fight real fires, we should train them in the training environment how to do that.
Here in Gloucestershire, they do have the right training facilities. And firefighters come here from all over the country to learn how to avoid the kind of mistakes made at Sun Valley. The Fire College at Moreton in the Marsh provides a level and quality of training that local brigades can't match. It's the jewel in the crown of the British Fire Service.
Right, this presentation is going to be on structural fires.
The facilities and teaching standards here are the envy of the world, preparing officers like Kevin Morley from Tyne and Wear to deal with major fires such as Sun Valley.
What we do here is we actually look at the role of the commander at incidents, and what we do is we analyse previous incidents, pick out why maybe they went wrong, why they went well, and how we can build up on that. We get a lot of theoretical input on command, and what we do is when we finish in the classroom, we actually take it out onto the drill ground and we put into practice what we've learned in the classroom.
At Moreton in the Marsh, officers are taught what to do in major incidents like the King's Cross fire, railway crashes and petrochemical fires. But Tyne and Wear Fire Brigade say the impending budget cut means it'll be sending less officers here in the future.
The facilities at Moreton are second to none. There's been a lot of investment into them, and it grieves me tremendously to be in a position where I cannot send my officers down there in the numbers that I would wish. The implications are that if officers don't go to Moreton and Marsh for training, then obviously they aren't as aware of health and safety, they aren't as aware of command and control techniques as they should be, and that could have a knock-on to the firefighters in Tyne and Wear and their safety at incidents.
It also has a knock-on to the future of the college itself. 3 years ago, the government turned Moreton in the Marsh into a commercial agency. It has to earn more than £16 million a year to survive and relies almost totally on its students for income. But our survey found nearly 2/3 of chief fire officers are planning to cut back on the number of officers they send to the college. Fire management consultant Brian Fuller has seen it from all sides. He ran 4 different brigades before becoming commandant at the Fire College. He left last year.
The college is unique on this planet. It was built to train the officers of the British Fire Service, has been very successful in doing so. And if brigades cannot send people there for whatever reason, and chief fire officers are increasingly telling me that's becoming very difficult because of financial pressures, then the college will itself be under financial pressure because it's not having the throughput of student it needs, and it's not earning the money it needs to pay its bills.
You're through to the alarm centre. Can I help you?
Do you know his pager number?
Bath City Council. To ring Liz.
Contact his office as soon as possible.
Your message has been sent. Thank you.
A glimpse into the future with Warwickshire Fire Brigade. Faced with the threat of budget cuts, they're trying to boost their bank balance by going down the commercial road.
Alarm centre, can I help you?
They've turned their control room into a communication centre. You can ring in with a genuine emergency or just to inquire about one of their many revenue-raising schemes, like the paging service.
So you want me to page Councillor McLaughlin, ring Rugby Evening Telegraph Myra Lee as soon as possible.
The brigade's been selling these pagers to people connected with the local council, charging between £2.50 and £8 a month. They've sold more than 100 so far.
I think the cost of it was a great influence to me. It's sometimes cheaper than British Telecom or Mercury. It's extremely useful. I'm able to get information very, very quickly that I need. It's almost like having a mobile fax machine clipped to my belt.
How appropriate do you think it is that a fire brigade control room should be getting involved in schemes like that?
It depends whether you're up against the wall financially. I suppose you could argue that it is not our business. But then I would say, well, they are all emergency related in some loose form, I'll admit, but they are all loosely related.
The entrepreneurial spirit of Warwickshire Fire Brigade knows few bounds. They charge private businesses £200 for fire alarms. They sell high-tech smoke detector testers, and they're moving into the market for burglar alarms. They're even thinking of giving driving lessons to the public. The chief fire officer says he has no choice. He needs the cash.
If we were going to do anything about meeting some of the pressures that we were facing, we were going to have to resource them ourselves. So a brainstorming session with my senior officers. What can we do to create revenue? And one of them was this, Warwickshire Street Maps, which in fact is a direct lift from something that we had done for a number of years for all our drivers on our fire appliances. And we thought, there might be a market out there. People might want to buy that. And it's, whenever this is the second reprint, and on each occasion it's #1 on non-fiction in Warwickshire.
Over the past 4 years, Warwickshire Fire Brigade have made more than £500,000 from their schemes. Much of it comes from the controversial charging for special incidents, like this chemical spillage on the M40 last year, which cost the owner £7,000. The brigade also charges for releasing people trapped in lifts and clearing up after road traffic accidents. It costs nearly £200 to call out Warwickshire to a non-fire emergency, and that's just for the first hour. Last summer, the owner of this house in Leamington Spa arrived home to find his cellar had flooded.
Well, I got to the top of the stairs and I heard this rumbling noise downstairs, and all I saw was this sofa floating across the water there.
Philip Griffin rang the fire brigade, who were there within minutes. It took them 5 hours to get rid of the water and left him £800 out of pocket.
How much more horrendous can you get than £800 to basically ring your local support, your local fire, your emergency services, and you get a bill for £800?
Did you think you'd already paid for that?
I would have thought so, within my rates and my council tax and everything else that goes with it. I would have thought somewhere along the line there would have been provision for that.
Taking a break between fighting fires and writing invoices, some of Warwickshire's firefighters are less than enthusiastic about their brigade's extra activities.
I'll be looked upon as a bit of a money grabber, so to speak. They give you some choice comments, I should expect, but you don't feel like a fireman and more like a tax collector.
That's their priority on their mind when we get there. How much is this going to cost? That should never be the way. That's not what we're here for.
People think for everything then that they're going to be charged. Old people are very vulnerable, and then I've had occasions where they said to me they just won't ring the fire brigade because they feel they're going to be charged. Obviously they can't afford it. So in my mind, you know, if it's a public service, then it should operate as a public service.
I have been criticised, and the moral side of it has been pushed in front of me on more than one occasion. The fact of the matter is that a time does come when you concentrate on providing a level of service, and some things have to give. And sometimes, you know, they are what is called the moral issues, charging for special services.
But how much would you give on the moral side? I noticed one of the charges you made was to an old age people's home where someone had got stuck in the loo and you charged them £200 to get them out.
And why not? Why couldn't they? I mean, why do you require the fire service to get somebody out of a toilet? You could go to the Yellow Pages and get one of a dozen people who might do it cheaper.
They probably would, but it'll take more than a few profit-making schemes to soothe the biggest financial headache of the fire brigade, their pension scheme. These ex-firefighters from Tyne and Wear are now drawing their pensions, but the money comes largely from fire brigade revenue and is expected to eat up almost 25% of each brigade's budget in 10 years' time. It could be as high as 50% in Tyne and Wear.
Well, it's the men that are in the service now who are paying the pensions of those who are retired. And the longer we live, the more they've got to pay.
We hear talks from the serving firefighters that we're using up their money because they would rather use that money perhaps for other things. We're using the money we're entitled to.
They say at the moment it's eating up 10% of their budget.
Yeah, I've no doubt. And it'll get worse. I think this year it's something like £5.5 million. But that's £5.5 million that isn't our fault that they need that.
The government were warned about the pension scheme 10 years ago. They've done little about it. Today's Audit Commission report calls it a time bomb and says the government should ensure it doesn't damage frontline services.
Well, the situation is potentially disastrous. I mean, we are in a very severe financial situation at the moment with severe difficulties. Obviously, if we have to pay out up to 50% of our revenue budget on pensions, and you could project that into the future and say that there's going to come a time when the Fire Authority does nothing other than pay out pensions, it doesn't put any water in fires, it doesn't employ any firefighters, then you can see the implications in what I'm trying to illustrate.
In Whitley Bay, after the deaths of the Austin family, fire prevention teams have been leafleting the area, warning people to get a smoke alarm. But as fire chiefs look around for ways to save money, this type of campaigning may be short-lived, and it doesn't stop there. Tyne and Wear Fire Brigade have already closed one fire station and expect to lose 50 firefighters by the summer. Around the country, some chief officers say they're no longer sure they can meet their statutory duties.
Chief fire officers are now saying enough is enough, there is enough cuts, you know, and that it's got to stop somewhere, and this is probably the time where people have got to dig in and say, sorry, we just cannot reduce any further. We've made all the easy cuts, we've made all the more difficult cuts. We're now in the ones where we consider that the public are going to be at danger if we go much further.
This brigade actually needs more money, not less, to make sure that it can do an efficient and effective job. I can't envisage how we can actually function if more money is taken out of the budget and actually provide the high level of service that the people of Hereford must have come to expect of the fire service.
When budgets are tight, fire prevention and training are the soft targets most likely to be cut. If the government don't heed the warnings of fire chiefs and the Audit Commission, the fear is that casualties will keep on rising. And it's not just the public whose lives are threatened, but the firefighters themselves, those in the line of fire.